Restorative justice currently at the Polk County Sheriff's Office and the 5th Judicial is lip service. It does not happen.
Okay. This is going to be a pretty far-reaching question, so keep that in mind as you're trying to answer it within 2 minutes. And this will be Bill will be answering this first. What are your plans to address the growing mental health problems in Polk County that affect the jail population?
We all struggle to make headway in that area. I think it's an area within the penal system that is just now getting the attention it deserves. The Polk County Board of Supervisors has created a Criminal Justice Advisory Council, and we have developed at the same time statistical information in the jail about who says they have mental health issues, and then who's on what kind of drugs, and we begin to track that information. It's going to be a slow process to try to get to a point where it can be productive for those people with mental health problems. We fully recognize that there are people in our jails that should not be there that suffer with severe mental health issues. But we also, as a society, have to be able to deal with their behaviors, and that's why they're there. The second thing we've done is we've traveled to Texas and Florida and a few other places and looked at what some progressive sites that have been written about have done. And just recently, with the Des Moines Police Academy in cooperation with Polk County Sheriff's Office, we formed a CIT unit, a unit that will respond where mental health issues are apparent, and with specialized training, the ability to talk somebody down, the ability to recognize certain disadvantages, a connection with the mental health industry here in Polk County so that we can access where the easiest and best help lies. It's difficult. It's a frustrating progression, but I think slowly society is going to produce results that will be helpful to the people that suffer in those situations.
Thank you. Dan, what are your plans to address the growing mental health problems in Polk County that affect the jail population?
As a day shift supervisor on patrol, I deal with both deputies that do mental health on a daily basis. One of them was on 3 to 11 shift. We pushed to get them on the day shift because obviously there's a lot of mental health judicial orders that come out. They will both tell you that we're way understaffed. They understand the fact that the troops are coming home from Afghanistan and Iraq. They're having a lot of mental health issues. They're having a lot of suicides. The numbers are through the roof, which means one thing. To assist the community, protect and to serve them, we need to increase our mental health unit. That's the bottom line.
Thank you. Back to you again, Dan, on the first one here. Do you believe that the number of supervisory staff within the Sheriff's Department is too high or too low or just right, and what are you going to do about it?
It's way too high, and when you have mandatory overtime in every division in the Sheriff's Office, and families are being stressed out, they're working 6 days a week, how do you expect to serve the community when your own staff is getting burnt out? The bottom line is we need to take some of the uppers that are sitting behind a desk doing nothing. They need to retire, and then we need to reallocate a lot of those positions into much needed positions at the bottom to alleviate overtime and increase the morale and the service to the community.
Thank you. Bill, do you believe that the number of supervisory staff within the Sheriff's Department is too high, too low, or just right, and what will you do about it?
It's a little bit high, and I acknowledge that, but I say it's high because the board, prior to my arrival here, embarked in the previous sheriff on a plan to civilianize the jail. And when you do that, you push the law enforcement, civil service folks out. And so we've had, and unless Dan wants to lay them off, we've had to find jobs for them. As those people move on and as they retire, we make those adjustments. Now, do we have the right supervisors in the right position? I think I've got a wonderful group of supervisors that do a very good job. And if things are so tense and pressure-filled in the sheriff's office, how come we don't have anybody ever leaving, looking for another employment. It just don't happen, you know. And one thing I've learned in law enforcement, whether it be in Des Moines or here, is this is a people-orientated business, and it's dangerous and it's complex, and the subject matter we deal with is the most complicated in the world, and that's another human being. And you've got to have experienced, educated supervisors to manage those line troops, or you're looking for lawsuits, civil rights violations, and problems.
Thank you. Here's kind of a philosophical question for you, because you probably can't do a lot about it, but we'll see what you'd like to see done. Are there any particular Iowa laws that you feel need to be changed? This relates to being a sheriff.
You know, I don't make the laws, but I try to enforce them to the best of my ability, and that includes the immigration laws. I would like to see some changes there, but I think I need to stop for a minute and tell you that local law enforcement, despite the lies that you hear on the radio month after month, are not empowered to arrest people undocumented or what you would call in an illegal position. Doesn't mean I support the federal government not securing the borders. It doesn't mean I understand that we have a problem, but it means we have to act within the law. And when Governor Branstad talked about utilizing the 287G program, and we went to him and said, if you do that, you fill our jails. And just like in Arizona, the dirty little secret is when a PIO arrests 20 people in a raid with cameras, he lets 20 out the back door with no cameras, because his jails are filled. Why are they filled? Same reason there would be for us. Because Arizona doesn't have a treaty with Mexico. Only the United States government can sign a treaty, so these people sit there until they let them out the jail. It's a political statement. It makes no sense, and it's no commentary on the situation we find ourselves in now.
Thank you. Dan?
I'm going to do everything I can to, when called to the State House for constitutional carry, I believe that is your Second Amendment, and I believe that there's a few states that have that, and our new weapons law is a step in the right direction. But I believe unless you're a felon, you ought to be able to protect and defend yourself and your family. As far as the immigration issue, I took the same oath of office I take in law enforcement that I took in the military. It doesn't say that the federal government is the only one that's going to sit on the border. When these coyotes bring these guys over here in 2 days for $1,500, that doesn't mean we turn a blind eye to them and just let whatever they want to do with the cartel and the gangs that are right here in Des Moines happen. It means you have a duty to protect and to serve the citizens that you were elected by.
Thank you. This will be directed to Dan. He'll be the first one responding. Why is our jail not being used to its capacity? Do you have any plans for changes in how it can be used?
The west wing of the jail is 500 beds. Right now there's a drug treatment program put in there which has, I think last count, 16 people. I just talked to somebody that was going through that drug treatment program 2 days ago. He said the director told him to his face that this was being moved from Fort Des Moines to the west wing of the jail for political reasons during the campaign. That's unacceptable. If you honor your oath of office and you actually defend and protect the Constitution and you do something about illegal immigration, I'm talking about when you pull somebody over and they are undocumented, you pulled them over for a reason. That doesn't mean you turn a blind eye. That means you take them to jail, they run through the process, you notify ICE, they run their fingerprints. If they are illegal, then ICE takes them from there. The federal government pays approximately $100 a day for U.S. Marshal inmates as well as ICE inmates. If you do the math on that at 500 bed and you fill that up and you continually do it, then economically you have those individuals, the cartel, the gangs, etc., that come here and say, you know what, I don't want to play in Polk County anymore, which ultimately saves money to the taxpayer.
Okay.
I just love the gang problem that we've got between Bondurant and Johnson and the Mexican cartels that operate there, which is our primary jurisdiction, by the way. It's not the city of Des Moines, it's not Urbandale, it's not Clive. But we've got a gang problem here, and if we don't watch it, they're going to take us over. Having said that, can you imagine somebody that dedicates their life to helping other people and works for practically minimum wage in a drug rehab program telling somebody that this is a sham? I struggle with that a little bit. But the fact of the matter is we don't think it's a sham. And I'll tell you something else. We just recently were accredited by the National Accreditation Agency that measures the jail standards, 183 standards we met. We went to Denver to pick up the certificate and the pat on the back, and one of the things that they complimented us on was our programming within the jail. Of course, you know, that the prisoners take advantage of that, and they use it to confer with their buddies and, you know, this kind of stuff. Come on, give me a break.
Well, if you've ever worked in a jail, you'd understand that.
All right. We've got a number of questions that I think this is going to be kind of a far-reaching one, so let's go ahead and try to deal with this. Bringing people into the jail, you know, it's when they get arrested and they are brought into jail. There's a couple questions here to deal with. How should prisoners be treated? What rights do they have? And those kinds of things. So let's deal with the issue of how do you treat prisoners in jail? What rights do they have while they're in jail? And I think this will be, Bill, will that be you next one?
I don't know.
I think so.
I thought it was Dan's, but go ahead.
Was it?
Yeah.
You finished the last one, yeah.
So it's mine?
Yes, sir.
They have their constitutional rights, just like the rest of us. And they have a right to be treated humanely, and they have a right to be treated with respect. And we expect certain things from them. In fact, our jail is a direct supervision jail, which means we don't lock them up in an individual cell. They share a pod, or a wing, if you will, depending on what terminology you use, with 63 other prisoners and one guard. And the system is predicated on our ability to do an assessment and determine which pod the prisoner should be in. But it's also contingent on us speaking to the prisoner and making sure they understand the rules and regulations clearly, and they go through a process to learn that. And also to say to them, look, chances are we didn't put you here, but if you act like an adult, we'll treat you like one. And most of them do exactly that while they're in the jail. Keep in mind, this is a jail, it's not a penitentiary. So most of the people in that jail have not been convicted of the crime for which they've been arrested for, which is one of the reasons, too, why we want to make sure that we treat them as they are in that constitutional situation, with the respect that a human being deserves.
Thank you. Second question?
I used to teach IPC, interpersonal communication skills, to young officers. Our officers in the jail do a phenomenal job at this. They direct inmates to do what they'd like them to do, oftentimes without physical force. There's statutes in there, obviously, in the Iowa Code and our own policies and procedures that govern how we treat people. The audio and video in the jail is phenomenal, which holds the inmate at check as well as the staff. I think they do a great job. The bottom line is you don't feel sorry for the individuals. You empathize with them. You put yourself in their shoes. That could be your dad or your mom in there. And oftentimes as young individuals, we might have been a 911 call away from being in the jail ourselves. So professional courtesy, fair but firm, that's my philosophy, and I think it's the philosophy of the detention officers that are in the jail.
Thank you. Back to you, Dan. What are your plans for reaching out to our diverse minority communities as sheriff?
Well, the share with the sheriff issue that I have is the direct thing that I'm going to do right off the bat. I'm going to utilize radio a lot and TV a lot, but I'm definitely going to go into the communities on a monthly basis, myself or my chief deputy, or both, and we're going to contact them, and we're going to go in their neighborhoods, and we're going to say, hey, what's the issues? What can we do to help? As the highest law enforcement official in your county, I believe you need to lead and not follow, and that's one way that we're going to lead and draw the community in and increase our community relations.
Thank you. And Bill? What are your plans for reaching out to our diverse minority communities?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is what I said before, is be open and honest and transparent. And really, you have to work at keeping a relationship with these folks, whether it's the Somalis or the certain Latino groups or African Americans or Cambodians or whoever it might be. You've got to actively work at keeping close to those folks, and you do that through attending some of the funerals of some of the important people within their group. You do it through making yourself present at some of their special day events and things of that nature. But where the rubber really meets the road is when something happens and there's a flare-up. Because we, police officers and deputies, occupy a potentially dangerous situation in society every day they go to work. And when those things explode and that community galvanizes itself against you, it's your ability to be seen as being fair and open that allows you to protect your employee and then work through some of the issues that they are concerned with and allow sufficient time to build so that you can determine exactly what truly did happen, and not the speculation that frequently happens with the media as soon as something happens. So you're there, you can't be too intrusive, but you've got to be seen as being open and honest and developing that relationship that carries you through when the tough times occur.
Thank you. This will be for you, Bill, first. In the next term, what is planned for the tactical team?
We have in the Polk County Sheriff's Office a tactical capability, which I think is absolutely critical to maintain, but we've done it in cooperation with and a joint relationship with the Des Moines Police Department and several other smaller agencies that contribute people. They train together, they learn how to use efficiently the weaponry that we need to deploy in those tactical situations, and they practice a good deal. It's a very expensive proposition, but I don't know how in an urban environment with the type of calls that law enforcement gets on occasion that you can go without having those life-saving capabilities, the ability to rescue 2 children out of a house when the dad's shooting a gun at you, or save a hostage, or take out somebody that's held up in a bank. These are highly technical things. The training is highly technical. The people that commit to do this are very specialized, and I just, by saying that I don't think you can do without it, I'm saying that it gets my 100% support. Now that's different than our CBRN team, and most people confuse that. That's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive, where we have specialized people. Sometimes they do both, but are trained in those environments with those protective suits and those equipments so that they can function in a man-made or natural disaster and save our lives until we can bring in the federal troops.
Thank you. Dan, in the next term, what is planned for the tactical team?
We're not a Los Angeles or a Chicago where we need more than one tactical team. There's not enough call-outs for that. The individual shifts on the agency with Des Moines Police Department and the Polk County Sheriff's Office are extremely taxed. We're paying a lot of overtime to cover for these training. What we need to do is draw in the West Side Tactical Team to the Des Moines Metro Tactical Team. People won't be on his call as much. You'll have better staffing on the street. We need to work together in our community to ultimately save money.
Thank you. Again, kind of a two-part question, and Dan, you'll be starting with this. What are your thoughts on people that are arrested taken to jail and released without being identified or fingerprinted? Let's leave it that one, and I'll ask the second one later.
That shouldn't be happening. 690.2 of the Iowa Code says if you come into the jail, serious misdemeanor and above, you shall be fingerprinted. A simple misdemeanor, a public intox or something like that, if you're so intoxicated that we don't know who you are, you're going to be fingerprinted because you don't have an ID or you're too intoxicated and we don't know who you are. You're going to be fingerprinted at a later date. But at no time should somebody leave there without being fingerprinted, because we don't want to jeopardize, obviously, the safety of the citizens.
Okay. Bill?
I cannot add to that. That's exactly our policy.
Thank you. Then the next part of this question, and Bill, this will be for you first. What is your opinion on early release from jail? How does this impact the community? Is it better for the budget?
Well, I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what they mean by early release from jail. You're talking about from a sentenced individual or somebody that's awaiting?
I'm assuming that the sheriff does not involve himself in determining when anybody gets released from jail.
Well, we can write a citation.
Mm-hmm.
We will do that if it's a simple misdemeanor and it's non-argumentative or minimally potentially violent. And if the arresting officer doesn't say to us, please hold that individual and don't use a citation. Otherwise, after they've come in and been processed and they've had time to cool down or whatever the timeout sequence was, it's appropriate to release them, and that does relieve some of the stress on the system in terms of arraignment and the feeding we have to do and the assignment to the cell and so forth and so on. But again, I'm not quite sure what it is they refer to.
Your guess is as good as mine. You got it?
That's one part of the question, what the sheriff said. The other side of it is maybe they're looking at the Sheriff's Work Alternative Program and an early release is if somebody works 10 days, they get 2 days credit. I believe that we should have a volunteer program if somebody wants to work and they want to get early out. Ultimately, that saves you and I money. And the bottom line is if they're working for something, then they've obviously taken something from society and now they're giving back. So I don't have an issue with that.
Thank you. Is there any rationale for the use of two-man patrol cars in Polk County? And this would be for you, Dan.
Well, I wouldn't do two-man patrol cars because the territory is so huge. If you're talking from Avon or Runnels all the way up to Farrar, all the way down to the Southwest Connector, all the way up to Jester Park, there's 4 deputies running that entire time. There's 2 additional deputies that are contracted in Grimes and Bondurant, but they can't leave unless there's a critical incident. I wouldn't do two-man cars. What I would do is double size of patrol. Obviously, those territories are so huge that on average, if the South or East Territory is needing backup, you're talking 10, 15 minutes away. That's unacceptable. In the city of Des Moines, in the cities that I worked in, you've got somebody usually within a minute because you have several people within a territory. A 10-minute ETA for somebody in a fight when you're down in Runnels and they're coming from 14th and 80 is too long and unacceptable.
Bill?
Dan, that's not entirely accurate. Des Moines' response time ranges from about 2.5 to 4 minutes on a priority 1, which is the more serious ones. As we look at the 4 officers that are assigned to the 4 beats, that's what's left in Polk County. That patrol capability is something that I wanted to talk about a little bit later, but it's something that's going to be phased out over the next 20 years. It's not going to happen tomorrow or in the next term, but it's going to happen. And we need to plan for that. We are the size of Urbandale in terms of population. Now, we occupy a much bigger space, but it's largely unoccupied, populated. It's rural. But Urbandale has about 40,000 people. We police for about 40,000 people. They field a patrol force of 4 to 5. We field a patrol force of 4 plus a sergeant, lieutenant, and then the 2 contracts. You put out there what you need. If you don't need 10 people, you don't put 10 people out there. Again, you're trying to operate the most efficient way you can with the taxpayers' dollars. These people that work patrol have on occasion been stressed and asked to do too much. But that's on occasion. You staff for the average. It's a simple management concept. You staff for the average. That's about the best anybody can do. And when I look at their trip load and I see that they're running 6 to 8 trips a night, that's not a whole lot of trips. And then when I look at the time it takes them to respond from the time the caller makes the call until they arrive, the times are comparable to Des Moines, and we live in a rural environment. And then when I look at every other factor, the complaints about we didn't get there in time or where was the deputy and so forth, we just don't get those routinely. So every indicator is we've got what we should have, and the idea that we only have 4, we have 4 because that's what we need to have at this point in time.
Thank you. Bill, back to you. Should the off-duty employment of Sheriff's Department employees be restricted in any way?
I believe that whether it's the deputy, I believe anybody in law enforcement who wants to work off-duty, and I support that. There's debates always around those issues about the use of the uniform in the car and things like that. But in reality, when you have deputies or law enforcement people that work certain areas off-duty where the business is paying for it, that alleviates some of the stress on the city or the county in terms of having to provide that same service. Here they're being paid for. Now the theory is when a criminal event occurs, that deputy goes back on the county's time so that we can provide some protection and liability for them, and so that they can make the arrest and be seen clearly as a law enforcement person. I just believe that you've got to keep the authority for where they work in the hands of the chief or the sheriff, solely and only. Because as you can imagine, given the spectrum of people that we have, just like in any other group, you're going to have some that are going to want to work strip joints in another place if you don't keep your hands on who does what, when, and why.
Thank you. Dan?
Most of your civil service employees at the sheriff's office that work court services and that work civil are not patrol trained. On a normal agency, you go through what's called the academy, and then you go through patrol training. This allows you to work off duty, make arrests, do the paperwork, etc., and not jeopardize the safety of a citizen or be the laughingstock of another agency because you haven't been through patrol training. We're the only agency in this state that currently does this. It's unacceptable. And the bottom line is when a citizen calls 911 or they're sitting there at working off duty at that quick trip and the guy's in a Class A deputy uniform, they're assuming that person knows what to do, knows how to fill the paperwork out, knows how to effectuate an arrest. You're setting yourself up for a civil lawsuit if you've got a deputy sitting there that went through the academy 10 years ago and it's still not been through patrol training.
This is going to be kind of a question on just basically a form of gun control, or how far does gun control go. The specific of the question is, what is your position on ownership of large capacity ammunition magazines? I think you can go ahead and go a little bit beyond that if you want to have a statement as sheriff about gun control in general.
Constitutional carry is pretty clear that your carry concealed weapons permit is the Second Amendment. Doesn't say anything in the Second Amendment of what type of weapon or how many magazines you can have. And you need to understand there's 90 million firearms owners in the United States, and they killed nobody yesterday. I'm not into taking away the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens to make somebody happy about high-capacity magazines.
Okay. Bill?
I think there was about 37 people shot and killed yesterday in the United States. Now, I don't know whether they were gun owners or not, but let's get real. The idea that we're going to let people have automatic weapons, high-powered automatic military weapons in a neighborhood, or that we're not going to use common sense about who can take them into a college campus or a classroom. All I can tell you is prior to the change of the law that occurred here, all the rifle and gun groups said Polk County did it right. They said we did it right. Me, Anderson, and Rice. And now with the change, and the gun groups smell something a lot more closer at hand, such as what Alaska does, unrestricted, unlimited, no common sense, because the Constitution doesn't say somebody has to be trained. Well, the Constitution doesn't say a lot of things. You don't substitute what you think it says or implies. You listen to what it says. And let's be fair-minded, intelligent, and reasonable about these very dangerous weapons that are plaguing our society.
Thank you. We're going to do one more question, and then it'll be time for closing comments. We do appreciate all the people that have turned in things. We did try to put a lot together so that we could get through at least the base of all the different questions that we have. The last question that we're going to go, and then we'll do closing, will be, what do you hope to accomplish if elected as sheriff? What are your top 5 things you want to see get done? And that will be, Bill will be first on that.
Well, I want to continue to manage the office in a professional way. I want to do it, and I've said over the last year and a half, I've pretty much given Dan free rein to say anything he wanted to say, whether it be 13 or 14 times on the largest radio station in the state that happens apparently to think the way he does, or whether it's been in any number of forums. I just believe that you can't bare your soul on every social issue if you're an executive in a law enforcement agency and then be called to a scene where sometimes our temperament gets the best of us and people clash, and then be considered by one side or the other to be impartial. It won't happen. It can't happen. So if you wanna let all your social, deep-seated social beliefs be known to the world, and you want to put them on your website, how are you going to be judged as fair as impartial by the people that disagree with you? I don't understand that, and I don't think my peers in the Polk County Chiefs and Sheriff's Association understand it very well either. But I understand that there is a need to project those ideas, to be that gun advocate, or to talk about throwing all the illegals into the jail, and to talk about certain things that quite frankly is an insult to our community when you talk about the illegals and what we're going to do, and it throws a scare into them. It causes them to shut down when a crime occurs so that we can't go in there and talk to them because they're afraid of us. That's not how you work with a community group. It's how you shut them down and you put them in fear and you treat them differently, the reality of their existence differently than you do anybody else.
Okay. What do you hope to accomplish if elected as sheriff? What are the top 5 things?
Well, the first thing that's extremely important is the morale. Believe it or not, there is believe it or not, there are people laterally into other agencies thinking about quitting the sheriff's office. And when you have 10, 15 years on and this amount of money that people have spent on you, you don't just quit a law enforcement agency and lateral someplace else unless you got a morale and a leadership problem. That's the first thing. That's got to happen first and foremost to affect change at the sheriff's office. The other things are listed on my website, charlestonforsheriff.com. There's 15 different issues. Anywhere from the budget, anywhere from constitutional carry, the cameras, share with the sheriff, doing something better with sex offender registry, restorative justice, a self-arrest program, financial warrants, doing that a couple times a year, working with the federal government. There's many different issues. We don't have enough time tonight to talk about it. And the bottom line is I'm interested in doing what's not politically correct, but what's constitutional.
We're going to give each candidate 3 minutes to do closing comments, and based upon the coin toss we had earlier, Dan will be the first one to do his closing comments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We had 3 minutes in the chair the other night with Dan Winters. I was honored to do that. We've been given an opportunity to speak on radio and 20 different parades over the last year and a half. There's many of you in this room that have jeopardized your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your supervisors while at work, because you're stepping forward doing a bold thing. I appreciate that. That's very honorable. I was talked to by Bob Rice years ago when we hired me. He said, Dan, someday you need to run for sheriff. I know some people don't believe that. The bottom line is we had breakfast 2 different times before he passed away. I sat on his body for 12 hours the night before out of respect for him. The sheriff's office of Bob Rice, the longest standing sheriff for 24 years, is no longer. We need to bring the morale back up. We need to concentrate on issues that literally we've been talking about for a year and a half that make sense. They're fiscally prudent and they're constitutional. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. There's another option for you to continue. We haven't had a Republican sheriff with common sense solutions since early 70s. You need to understand it's not about the Democrat, the Independent, and the Republican. The sheriff is the sheriff of all the people, the Independent, the Republican, and the Democrat. Okay? So if you like the issues and you like what you see on the website, then you have a clear choice in this election. If you don't like what you see, then you've got the status quo.
Thank you. Bill, you've got 3 minutes for your closing comment.
Well, I thank you. I didn't talk about the things I wanted to accomplish because, again, I viewed this as an opportunity to kind of rebut some of the things that's been said. But I want to forego all of it and talk about something that, quite frankly, scares the hell out of me and something I've never really seen before in anybody running for a law enforcement position. Dan's bumper sticker on everything he distributes and every comment he makes is he's going to be a constitutional sheriff. We need to talk about that a little bit. On the surface, you know, if I want to look at it from a lighthearted standpoint, I might say, well, what does that mean? Because I could say I want to be a love your family sheriff. What does that mean? Well, I assume we all love our family, just like we all have a right to claim the Constitution without saying it. But the truth is he saying that because he wants to infer that somehow his opponent doesn't abide by the Constitution? Somebody that's had military training and taken the oath 3-4 times? I don't understand that. But I do understand what he means when he says constitutional sheriff. And he knows it too, because on his website is reference to Sheriff Richard Mack, who is an anti-government person who was thrown out of office in Graham County. He's written a book, The Constitutional Sheriff. As best the National Sheriff's Association can tell, and this is serious business, there's only about 60 of them that show up for their conferences the last 2 years, but they're very vehement. They are very vehement. Guns are their number one objective, the support. Second Amendment, they call themselves constitutional. The third thing is they fight about land management issues. They're still fighting the war out west of the 1870s because they don't like what Theodore Roosevelt did when he designated certain national parks. The second thing that they get into, and something that scares me a lot, is they talk about the IRS as Gestapo, and they talk about the military as somebody that ought to recognize their constitutional duties and beat to a different drummer. It's a little bit scary stuff. But that's not, if it just stopped there, I'd say, Dan, come on now, this ain't right. But you got a right to think the way you think. But then the other day, I opened his website up, and he's got a reference on there, the Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers. It's a group that is affiliated with this, but they're the big boys. These are people on a Patriots list from the National Poverty Law Center, where they are on a watch list for extreme radicalism. McVeigh died going to his grave saying he was that kind of a patriot. This guy that runs the Oath Keepers movement, who says he's a constitutionalist, has now come out on his website and said it's time to arm because we think Obama might win. It's time to arm, and it's also time to store food for the war that's coming. This is the kind of garbage that you're going to get if he's elected.
Hey, folks,
This is about as radical as it gets.
Well, I'm glad it was closing comments.